I'm Dedra with Stream Water Farm. Me and my husband, my 4 kids, we live on a small homestead in South Mississippi. And I'd like to welcome you to episode 2 of Ink and Overalls. I'm really happy that you decided to join me today. I hope that we can have a good time talking about a pretty heavy subject today. Actually, this is about the 4th, maybe 5th time I've sat down to record this. And I don't want to ramble. I don't want to confuse anybody or talk in circles. And so here I am one more time doing it because I'm going to get it right. And we're talking about something today that's really, it's a big question in the homestead community for people who want to learn more about homesteading, people who are trying to get started, even people who have been doing it for a while. You sit and you wonder this thing. And that question is, what are the fundamental skills that every homesteader should master? Number one, I just want to start by saying mastering a skill is nearly impossible because of the variables you have when you're homesteading. So I'm just going to cut that out right there and say we're not trying to master skills. We want to learn things, but I can't say I'm a master at growing tomatoes. But now last year I grew lots and lots of tomatoes, but this year not so much. I didn't master that because nature has a whole lot to do with that. And I feel like most things with homesteading are like that. A lot of it revolves around variables, animals, weather, plants, nature, things that we can't always control. So we can get good at things. We can try our best to dedicate time and effort into learning what we can and what we need to know as far as homesteading skills go. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a continuous process. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that. There is no goal you've got to reach to consider yourself good enough to start homesteading. And even as you start and you continue, there's going to be a learning curve just about every chance that you start thinking that you've got it, something figured out, something's going to come your way that's going to kind of make you rethink, reconfigure. And that's just a homestead, right? It's living. It's alive. It evolves. It moves. It changes. Nothing's going to stay the same. What works for you one year may not work for you the next year. And there's very little we can do to change that. But it's okay. What we can do is we can be prepared for whatever gets thrown at us. And it's our responsibility as homesteaders to know certain things so that we can steward and manage our resources well and do the best we can with what we have. Now, I'm going to talk about, you're going to hear me use the word stewardship, not just in this episode, but going forward, I will likely use it a good bit. And that's because I like that word. Because I think, of course, we go back to the Bible, we talk about stewardship of resources. And in my opinion, that was it's not opinion, it's the fact. When God placed Adam and Eve in the garden, Adam's job was to steward the garden. He was supposed to steward the animals and what was there. And I feel that that's deeply ingrained in us from the beginning of humanity. And so stewardship is important to me. It's not just about being a steward of your monetary resources, which is what a lot of us think about, but we're stewards of whatever we put our hands to. And so if you've got a few herbs in your windowsill in your apartment, you're a steward of those herbs. If you're running a 400-acre beef cattle ranch, you're a steward of that acreage and you're a steward of those animals. And I think a big responsibility comes along with that. And I don't think it needs to be entered into lightly. I think that we can't, I think it's smart to think as you're getting into homesteading to think, what skills do I need? That's responsible. You need to ask yourself those things. But at the same time, there's a balance that you have to strike with the reality that you're going to have to continue learning. You're not going to achieve the mecca of homesteading and know everything all of a sudden and not need to continue learning anything. That's just not going to happen. It makes it fun because it is unpredictable, because you can't really guarantee, like I said previously, every year is going to be different. Okay. So there's a lot of ways to approach this question. I've already started talking some about the practical side of things, and that's where we're going to continue going for a little while. And then I'm going to delve into more of what I really feel like are the two main skills you need. And those are a little more philosophical. So we're going to go into that in a minute. But first, talking more about homestead skills. So what you need to learn. So what you need to learn is going to be based on you, your goals, your why. Why are you doing this? What do you want to see happen? Your dreams. All of those things are going to affect what skills you need as you proceed in building your homestead. Now, I say building your homestead. I've shared in the first episode that I began reading about, for example, dairy goats before we were anywhere where I could even think to get any dairy goats. But it was important because it was something I saw coming, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And once again, it was just a responsibility, because we have a responsibility to these animals and to this land and to this place, and we're blessed to acquire a place, and we're put somewhere, no matter where that is, whether or not it meets your ideals of what a homestead should be, whatever you're given, whatever you got in front of you, let's do the best we can with it, right? So, obviously, some of the more practical skills would be, for example, animal husbandry, and that is an overarching term. It can apply to lots of things. We have here at Streamwater, we've got dairy goats, we have chickens, we have pigs, and those things all serve a purpose, and they all have to be managed a certain way. And so I have acquired the knowledge to take care of these animals out of necessity and out of the desire to do the best I can with them. But now listen, we did not get chickens and goats and pigs all at the same time. You can't overwhelm yourself with information and with building skills and building knowledge. You got to start somewhere. Take it slow, because a homestead takes time. I mean, you can be 7, 10, 12, 20 years out, and there's still going to be things changing on your homestead, because your life is going to change. Your financial situation will change. Your goals will change. What your family looks like and what's important to your family may change. So don't get stuck thinking that you've got to learn XYZ before you can start anything. Learning is very important, but it's continual, and you don't need to overwhelm yourself feeling like you got to do everything at once, because that will get you in trouble. It'll get your animals in trouble. It'll get you in trouble financially. It can get you financially in trouble. It can really weigh you down emotionally, physically. And so you want to think about what you can handle. You want to start there. And I think a great place to start is often in the kitchen, honestly. If you're going to homestead, you're going to have things you need to learn how to deal with, right? So whether you're going to be growing a garden, you're going to be keeping chickens for eggs. Maybe you want to eventually have a dairy cow or a dairy goat. You're going to have to be comfortable in the kitchen. You're going to have to be comfortable using those resources that you're given, because abundance is messy. When you think you want all these things, but dude, when you start pulling all this stuff into your kitchen and you're looking and you got laid out, you've got peppers, you've got fruits, you've got, gallons and gallons of milk to deal with. That is an abundant blessing, but abundance is a little overwhelming sometimes. So knowing how to deal with those things is a great place to start, because you get the garden going, but if you can't, you don't know what to do with the veggies that you've got, you don't know how to cook them, you don't know how to even start preserving them, that might be discouraging for you. So I think a good place to start often is in the kitchen, learning how to maybe can some jams and things, and water bath canning. Ball makes a great book that has lots of recipes and things like that. I have another book, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll list it in the notes. But it's a great one that I started with, and just, YouTube videos, different things like that. I think that's a great skill to learn. Sourdough is real popular right now, but it's not for everybody. I love it, but I didn't start making sourdough until probably 2 years ago. So I get that that's not something everybody wants to jump right into, and that's fine. But those resources are out there. There are books and YouTube channels, Instagram accounts, and blogs, different things you can get to for just about anything you want to learn. So as far as a practical beginning, I think starting where you're at in the kitchen is a great idea. Getting back to some of your roots of not expecting convenience all the time and being able to use ingredients instead of ready-made things, because it's easier that, it's easy to pop open a package of stuff. I do it even now, but when it gets down to it, what I really want is nutritious and beautiful food for my family. And that takes like learning what to do with it. Right. So I think that no matter where you are, you likely have access to a kitchen, whether you need to go to a family's house and like say, hey, can I use your stove? I'm going to learn how to can some jam or whatever. A lot of us have access to a stove, no matter where you're living. You can be in an apartment and have access to a kitchen. So I think that's a great place to start. You can start by, go get some vegetables at the farmer's market or from a local farm, and learn how to, even if you're just like freezing spaghetti sauce or something to use later, or just learning how to, roast some tomatoes to make a pizza or whatever you want to do. There's just so many things that you can start in the kitchen, because all of these things we do, it's amazing really, but it all ends up as part of our nourishment and part of the kitchen. So I think that's a great place to start. As far as animal husbandry goes, I'm going to always tell you that I think chickens are like the gateway. They are the easiest things to take care of. They provide you with compost. They can provide you with eggs. They can provide you with meat if that's the direction you want to go in. And so I think that trying as soon as you can to get a few chickens, whether it's just a few hens, because you can have just a few hens and have eggs. You don't have to have a rooster to have eggs. A lot of people don't know that. And that's okay, but you don't have to have a rooster. So if you just want a few hens in your backyard in a small, in a small coop or whatever you want to start with, I strongly encourage you to do so. Just being around the animals, getting comfortable with them, and just managing them, learning what they eat, watching them grow, learning how they respond to the seasons, because they molt and they'll slow down their laying processes and different things. And all of that you learn as you go, but you start by learning, like, how do I take care of these animals? And because you don't want to bring something to your place without first exposing yourself to it to some extent. Now, also, like, there's going to be things you have to learn from necessity on your feet. A lot of stuff you'll learn on your feet. So you can learn basics. You can expose yourself to lots of things. But once again, I'm going to keep saying this. Don't overwhelm yourself by thinking you have to know everything all at once, because you don't. If you want to learn about gardening, you can start with container gardening. You don't have to start with an acre in-ground garden. I do not have an acre in-ground garden. I don't want one. I admire people who do it. I have a raised bed garden. It's pretty big. I love it. I love growing in it, but I'm still learning every single day. But you can always start with some grow bags or some small pots of things. Right now, this time of year, you can order, is the time to order garlic if you're in the same zone as me or a similar zone. I'm like 8B, 9A because they kind of changed. But the places that sell garlic bulbs right now are getting their stocks in, and they go fast. So if you want to grow garlic, it's time to hop on Google, find some places that are selling garlic bulbs, and you can start your garlic, and you can grow it in containers if you want to. That's a great way to start. Yeah, so as I was saying, garlic is a great place to start. There's almost always something you can be growing, depending on your zone, your area. But if there's not something you can be growing, you can always be planting. And that's almost just as fun. So whenever I say gardening zone, I don't know, some of you may not be familiar with that term, and I'll talk more about it as we go through, I'm sure, because gardening is going to be a big thing we talk about a good bit. It's one of my favorite things ever. But I refer to myself as being an 8B, 9A. Those are the U.S. Hardiness zones in the United States. And so that kind of divides us. It's not so much about how hot it gets in your area. It more has to do with how many days you have above or below a certain temperature, I believe. And so it is important to know, because there are certain things that thrive in certain environments and in certain hardiness zones that won't thrive in others. And it's real easy to find. You just Google it and it'll show up. Just Google your zip code and say, what zone am I? And you can usually find the information fairly easily. And yeah, I'm just going to keep talking like I didn't just completely change clothes and hair and everything else. It's a new day, y'all. I was recording yesterday and I thought I finally had it, and then realized that like 14 minutes in, my camera battery had died. And so I'm using that as the front part of this. And then now it's a new day and we're on the other part of this because I have to finish. And, yeah, I'm just comfy today. So I actually made it a little cooler in here than I did yesterday because it was burning up yesterday. And so I put on my zip up hoodie because it's really cute. It's got even overalls on it. Isn't that cute? So anyway, sporting that today. It's comfy. But let's finish talking about our skills. So this is a hard thing to unpack. And like I've already told you, I can't cover everything. It's just so many different things. But as we just talked about, like we talked about with gardening, like that you can start planning. Planning and starting small are two important things that you're going to want to do. So whenever we started gardening in our small garden when we lived in the city limits in our old house. And actually my husband, Eric, he did a lot of that gardening himself. Like we did it together, but he was real involved too. And then like kind of his life has changed and different things came up. When we got here to the new place, I kind of took even a greater interest in gardening and stuff. And so anyway, had a couple of years of growing in the ground in our big garden we had started. And it did not go well. If it could be killed, I killed it, I promise. Okay. So I do not sit here and claim to be a master gardener by any stretch of the imagination. I can grow things and I adore it, but I can kill things too, I promise. But so anyway, we eventually ended up starting a small raised bed in the backyard. We just started I built 2 4x4s with my kids one day, just on a whim kind of, and started using that to grow in and loved the results we got. And then slowly, kind of every garden season, we'd add a few beds to it. And now it's pretty big, honestly. We've pretty much filled in the space where it is, and it's beautiful and I love it. And growing in raised beds is just wonderful and I love it so much, but I had to start small. If I had walked into a garden, even the size of that mine is right now, and it's not a 2,000 square foot humongous garden, my kids are in the swimming pool. They're okay. They're just playing. If you hear that, they're yelling. But anyway, we started with 2 small beds. It eventually grew. I would have been completely overwhelmed, I think, had I started with anything more. And it's expensive. You start filling up beds and buying soil for that. I mean, there are ways that you can cut costs, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up having to, like, building the beds is not nearly as expensive as filling them if you're going to do raised bed gardening, for example. And so you want to start gradual with that. You want to start small. You don't want to get overwhelmed. You don't want to get financially taxed. You don't like stress to the max on that. You don't want to burn out. You want to enjoy the process. You need to enjoy the process because it's hard work. And so if you're not enjoying it, it's going to become tiresome and it's going to just become another thing to check off your list. And if it becomes that and you're not finding that joy anymore, then you're going to have a whole new set of problems to deal with. And so I just strongly recommend when it comes to animals, infrastructure, growing things and gardening, any of that stuff, the more steady, consistent growth you have, the less likely you are to get completely overwhelmed and burn out. Because we do see that in the homesteading community. People do get burnout. And people do end up just saying, I'm done, and scrapping the whole thing and just moving and going back to, a different way of life. And that's fine for them if that's what they need. But I like to think that kind of if you ease into it a little bit more gradually, then you're a little more used to, like if I'm already feeding, a coop of chickens, it's not, to eventually add in and gradually add in 30 to 50 meat birds I'm taking care of every day. Okay, so I can add those. And then, but I don't want to add like everything at one time. But you do. Like, okay, you want to, but you don't need to. Can I say that? You want everything at once, especially if you just got a place or if you're dreaming about a place. You want everything at one time. And yes, there are exceptions to every single rule. There are going to be people that can jump in head first on a 40-acre place with everything in place and do amazing things. I personally am not one of those people. And so I'm kind of talking from a standpoint of my own experience, in that, like, I would have been completely overwhelmed had I moved here and immediately had what I have right now. I would have, like, just not known where to start. It was a gradual increase, and it was a learning process as far as what was working for our place and what our goals were for our place. When you first move to a homestead, you got to consider your homestead has certain, like, zones and little ecosystems of its own within it. So, everything is not going to work for your place that works for someone else's. For example, we have a lot of wooded area down on this side of our property. And when we first moved here, it wasn't being used for anything. Well, now we use it for pigs and goats. But now that's not the perfect space for, like, sheep or cows. That acreage down there is for goats and pigs. They love that. They forage well. They stomp down brush for us. They keep it all cleared. It's a wonderful thing. But we didn't know when we first moved here that that's the way we wanted to use that space. You can kind of think things one way, but then when you put your hand to it, it's going to be a little bit different sometimes. And that's okay. And that kind of brings me to the final thing I'm going to say to wrap up. And that is, whenever I looked at that question and thought, what are the fundamental skills that a homestead person, like a homesteader, needs to master? My first thought were these two things: a desire to learn and a willingness to try. Because I really, truly believe in my heart that if you can do those two things, you can really master those things. Because I think you really can. Those are things you can master, is like being willing to try things and wanting to learn more. You get that knocked out of the park and you're good. You're going to figure it out. There's enough resources at our fingertips. You've got enough people to call on. You've got, people who have previous experience they're pulling from, and they're teaching every single day on different platforms. So there are books that are out there, like I mentioned earlier. There's plenty of ways to find information and to learn how to do something. So you've got that desire to learn. You're going to figure it out. But all of that is just hypothetical, and it's all just in your mind until you actually step out your door and try it. Or you walk into your kitchen and you try it. You've got to be willing to take that next step and do the dang thing. Because if you don't, you can have all this knowledge in your head, but you're not applying it. It's not doing you any good. So, you got to be willing to try. And at that same time, you got to be able to say, okay, if I fail, I'll try again. Because when you try something for the first time, especially, there are odds there that it may not work for you the way that you're doing it at that time. Maybe you need to do it different, or maybe you just need more practice. But you got to be willing. You got to be willing to try it. Otherwise, it's all just talk. And you can't wait for the perfect scenario. You can't wait for the perfect day, or, wait until you feel like you're the perfect person to get out and do it. Like, oh, I'm equipped now. No, you can learn what you can, expose yourself to as much as you need to and you want to. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's all knowledge until you actually step out of your comfort zone and you actually put the work in. And that can be scary, but that's one of the beautiful things about homesteading, is how it stretches you. Because most of us were not raised doing the things that we're going to end up doing on a homestead. If you were, that's awesome. But a lot of us, some of it we may have had exposure to, but some of it we haven't. So it's all been a learning process, And so it stretches you in ways that sometimes normal life, I mean, like, people who don't choose this as their path, which is understandable, that's fine. But they don't always get the opportunity to stretch themselves the way we do. It's like, how many people can say that they know how to, it's like, oh, I can make bread, or I can pull a baby goat that's stuck, or I can give, I can give medicine, or I can grow this, or I can start seeds. I mean, it's really cool because you get exposure to everything, and you just kind of learn on your feet. And before you know it, you're like, oh, I've tried that. I've done it. I may not be the best at it, but like I have experience and I've done it. And you can be proud of that. And that's an awesome thing. Like, even if you tried and failed, be proud of yourself for trying. Like, step out and try. It's going to be okay. If you don't succeed the first time, literally try and try and try again, because things change. You change. Your place will change. Seasons will change. And you never know what you can accomplish whenever you set your mind to it. So just don't be afraid to try, okay? Don't be afraid to try. Never stop learning. Keep that desire to learn, and you're going to be just fine. You are. I promise. You're going to be fine. And so, all of that to say, I will see you later. No. And that's about all I have for today. That's about all I can say without repeating myself 1,000 times or droning on and on and on. And I don't want to do that. So I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. If you've watched, if you've listened, if you've shared, all of those things, it means so much to me. I'm so excited about where we're headed. I can't wait to do more and to see you again. You can find me on Wednesdays on YouTube, and on Sundays I will be posting to like podcast platforms, the audio to podcast platforms. So if you want to listen that way, you can check it out on Sundays. On Wednesdays, you can find me at Wally Media Group on YouTube, and you can like, share, subscribe, comment, all those things. You know, they help so much. And also, you can follow me on social media. You can find me at Streamwater Farm on Instagram and on Facebook. I have a TikTok. I'm not very active there. And I also have a website, inkandoveralls.com, where you can go learn a little bit more about my family. You can sign up for a newsletter at the bottom of the page. I'm going to get a newsletter started hopefully soon. And you can also, there's links there for merch. There's links for my shop where I sell my herbal salves, tinctures, soaps, things like that I make on the side also. And you can check all that out if you'd like to. But in the meantime, I hope that you'll find the beauty wherever you are, that you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.